I'm not proud about this, but I left school having failed all of my O-levels. Sertec is a £200 million business operating from 5 sites, 4 in the UK and 1 in Hungary, and we also have a presence in China. There were a lot of good companies around, but when I look around now, there's not many of our competition that's left. Where everybody else was running from the fire, we were running to the fire.
There are fears the sell-off will continue on Wall Street.
Soaring gas prices, falling home prices, and rising unemployment.
I knew we wouldn't go under that. I knew that we were too good. Keep the DNA, keep what we're doing. Don't give the customer an excuse to take the business. And we were too important. You got to be at the front, and I can't show weakness to my team. I can't show weakness to the workforce. We will get through this, and we did. But then, pandemic hits. Grant, if you make another cut, I won't be able to pay my mortgage. We had 6 months of, I can only describe as pain. And that whole process cost us £2.5 million. And their opening gambit to me, and I had to face off to it, was you're either very inept or you're very naive.
The Metal Guys Talk Business podcast is brought to you by Compton Group, a specialist recruitment agency operating in the metals, engineering and manufacturing industry sectors. Enjoy the pod.
Hey guys, Pete and Mike,
The Metal Guys.
with Grant Adams today. How you doing, Grant?
Really good.
Thanks for the coffee.
Okay.
Yeah. Way
I'm
better than
impressed
Yorkshire.
you think it's good.
Yeah, it is.
Was it out of a machine?
No. I actually never ask anybody to do anything that I wouldn't do myself. So I actually made the coffee myself.
Fair play.
Decent, mate, yeah.
Yeah.
Well done. Let's start with how you first got involved with Sertec. For people that have never heard of Sertec, maybe if you could give us just a little, like, where you are as a business, like the elevator pitch, and then we'll jump back into how you first got involved. So who are Sertec?
So Sertec are a supplier into the automotive industry. We were known affectionately as a metal basher. Things have evolved a lot since the metal bashing days. So Sertec is a £200 million business operating from 5 sites, 4 in the UK and 1 in Hungary. And we also have a presence in China, an office in China, supplying the likes of Jaguar Land Rover, and that's where the business was born out of, really.
So how did you get involved early doors? What was your kind of first step into it? Did you know someone or just...
No. I started my career way back in the British Leyland days, 1977. So BL cars. For those who probably...
They were good quality, weren't they?
Well, it was different, but I worked at the Sherpa fan division.
Oh, yeah.
Which is at Common Lane. It doesn't exist anymore. I learnt a lot there, and I came out of my apprenticeship, and in the last year, I was assigned into procurement, into purchasing. So one of the very first jobs I had was dealing with all of the metal bashers, as it was. And it's very different then to how it is now. There was literally hundreds of metal bashers, lots of companies making metal stampings and welded assemblies. And Sertec were one of the suppliers into what was Freight Rover then. And that's how I got involved with Sertec. I met a guy called Harry Mosedale, the founder, and his son, Graham Mosedale. And I must pay homage to another guy called Ray Mansfield, who did leave the business, but they were really 3 key individuals, 3 people who changed my life when I look back, without that sounding too dramatic, but it's true. And I first met Harry, and I'd never seen a Rolls Royce before. So the only time I ever saw a Rolls Royce was the woman on Crossroads had got one. And Harry Mosedale was in a Rolls Royce, and when I tell you the story, you'll understand why. So I'm dealing with all these companies, and I was dealing with Sertec, and we'd got a problem. we got an issue on site. I rang up and there was nobody available from the quality department. You've got to remember, it's a very small company then, Sertec. So Harry Mosedale turns up, and he's the owner. So he turns up in a Rolls Royce. So it caused a bit of a stir. So I went to meet him at the gatehouse. Harry Mosedale's turned up, okay. Trying not to be, because I'm the customer, but I'm trying not to be in awe, but I think I kind of was. I said to Harry, we've got a problem with this part you've produced, and he said I need to have a look at it. I said, well, it's in our stores area. He said, yeah, okay, can we drive to it? I said, yeah, I'll get us a pass. So he said, jump in the car. So I jumped in the car, went to the stores area, and we had this problem with this part. And Harry Mosedale said, it was a clamp plate, and there was basically, it was a painted part, and there was paint in the holes, and it's quite an important part because the body, the Sherpa van body, dropped onto this clamp plate, so it would have stopped to the track. So Harry said, I know what to do with that. He said, have you got a gauge that take the paint out? And the guy in the store said, yeah. He said, okay. He'd done no more, took his jacket off, rolled his sleeves up, said, I'll do them myself. So that had that impressed me, that he, again, I go back to the coffee, when he wouldn't ask anybody to do anything that he wouldn't do himself. But what's strange was, I found myself taking my jacket off. Now, I'm about 22 years of age then, and I did them with him. What that happened then, a lot of people in the stores area were looking at this, and he hadn't really, this is a guy in a Rolls Royce, self-made millionaire. Probably wasn't at the time, but he certainly was on the road to do that. And one of the buyers, and when we worked the parts, we made sure that the track never stopped. He got me then. He was probably the third mentor in my life. My first was obviously my mum and dad. And then there was another guy I worked at Freight Rover with who was a real, I nearly swore then, but he taught me about discipline in terms of work. But Harry was what I wanted to aspire to, I suppose.
Do you think it was the reason was because he was like, he'd self-made it, but he's actually the first person in the business world who was actually relatable? Obviously, you worked for like big corporates there, haven't you?
Yeah, and he was very relatable, and he was different and to what I'd been used to. I'd also met a lot of metal bashers, stampers. Let's not be disparaging to the metal bashing, stampers, let's call it. And I'd met a lot of these guys, and some of them were typical salesmen.
Yep,
they're in it for the money. But what I felt about Harry, and what I found out subsequently with Sertec at the time, was it was a very family-owned. They were very much about the people. So we had another problem where a company had gone, this is the 80s, companies were going bust all over the place. And there was a lot of overcapacity then. So the market, the stampers was shrinking. So there was a company called, I can't think of the name, began with an I, but it was in the Black Country. And they went bust, and overnight there was no stock, and we got to keep the tracks running. So Sertec got me out of a hole. They sent a wagon in, we paid the administrator, and they took the tools, and we were back up and running. I felt an obligation though about that I was in it with them. That day that I took my jacket off, and I was working with Harry to modify these components or take the paint out of the threads, it was in me. So I found myself going back on the night and into his factory, which he was placed in Aston Brook Street, Aston, and I bought more fish and chips. Now, he might not seem a lot, but they then thought, he's okay as a customer. He's not telling them, do as I say. I was in it with them. And Harry was there, and I think they worked till gone into the night. I think I left, so I'm not going to exaggerate the story. I think I left about 11 o'clock on the night. But I'd gone in, showed willing, bought them fish and chips, and they were working. Moving on from that, I was probably dealing with Sertec for 2 years, as I was with a lot of other companies. There were a lot of good companies around, but when I look around now, there's not many of our competition that's left. And we've acquired some of them. Some of them have fell by the wayside, and some have grown into huge conglomerates. But Sertec were different. Harry was different. And he made sure that he never overpromised. I never had to check when I shook his hand that I was going to lose my rings or my watch. Some of them, you did. So that's really how I got first introduced to Sertec. And then when the opportunity came, I moved on from Freight Rover. I went to Land Rover, parts and equipment, which was the spares division at the time at Beacon Hill. And I had a phone call from Harry, and I still kept in touch with him and his son. His son was my age. And Harry had asked, he said, do you fancy coming out to see me? I knew in my mind what that was. I just got married. This is now 1985. I'd been married a year. I was on the trajectory at Land Rover, where I was starting to, I suppose, progress. I was bored, didn't like the corporate structure. I didn't like the fact that there was that much red tape. I wanted to get things done. And when Harry offered me the opportunity, when I went to meet him, I knew as soon as I walked through the door, and he was talking about what he wanted me to come in as. And he wasn't leaning on my, you can do this for us in terms of sales. It was actually to put in terms of procurement. And what I didn't realise at that point when I met Harry, he was clever. His son was the same age as me. He was already putting a succession plan in place for when he retired. So he saw me that I'd got corporate experience, I'd worked at a big company, and he realised that his son needed some expertise of what the customer side of things was, and to put a more professional process system in on procurement. And he said to me, look, if you come and join us, Grant, I know it's a big wrench because of where you're at and where you're perceived. I wouldn't say I was as polished as some of the people there, because some of them were graduates. I'd had a reasonable schooling, but I was streetwise. He knew that. And I think that helped me with Sertec. And I joined, and as I said, his comment was, look, if this works out, he said, you'll be a director at Sertec. And by the age of 29, so I was, when I joined Sertec, I was 24. So before I was 20, I was actually 28. He made me a director, commercial director. And as they say, the rest is history. That was a company at the time, 120 people, turning over £2.5 million. And he consolidated the 4 sites he'd got onto one, which we still got now, which is what I call us home, our spiritual home, which is at Holborn Hill in Aston. And for those who are listening, Aston is God's country.
Yeah,
for obvious reasons.
Is that what used to be Presslight?
He evolved into Presslight. It was Sertec Birmingham.
Yeah. When
he consolidated the sites the year earlier, we just outgrew it. And that's what's happened with the sites that we've got.
And was it predominantly Ford parts that you were doing at the start? How it started?
No. The misconception about Sertec is that it was always in automotive. It wasn't actually. It started out making tooling.
Yep.
So Harry worked at a company called Car Bodies, and he was a brilliant tooling engineer. And I know you're going to think that I talk a lot about him, but he had such a massive effect on my life. And what we see today is down to him and his son. Going back to it, the first production parts, so they made tooling, but the first production parts were for a window company that was in Plume Street in Aston. And then the first automotive contract was with Triumph in Liverpool, where the legend was born, I think, for Sertec, because they had an issue at Triumph. So he went up to speak in Liverpool. Another company had gone bust. This is the 60s. And they asked Harry if he could, look, he said, we'll try you out. Very, very different then. So he collected the tooling and they in the back of a van, and they wanted the parts next week. Harry delivered the parts the same day. He'd done the same What he did with me, he under-promised but over-delivered. They said, right, now come back with a bigger van. It sounds cheesy, but it's true. He came back, and that's how he first got into the automotive and grew the business from there. And that, you can talk about lots of things about running a business, but if you haven't got that desire and that passion that he had, and that DNA that runs through this business, it started from that, as far as I'm concerned, from that day. And if we ever lose that, we're just another company.
Is it 29 you was, or 28 commercial director? Like, what was your route from there? Like, how did the conversation come about that it was like, especially when he's got a son who's the same age as you, like, how did the conversation come about of, like, Grant Adams taking over then?
Graham was a very good engineer, and he was brilliant with plant. He was different to me in terms of personality. I think Graham could walk in the room, and you walk in the room now and he's got an aura about him. Graham found it difficult, by his own admission, probably being direct with people. I use the football analysis. It's a big part of my life. The Villa and Sertec are very, very similar. Is how I look at it. I played football. I'd captained the school, primary school, and also at secondary school. I wasn't the best footballer, by the way. So whilst I grew up around Gary Shaw, I was not a Gary Shaw. So let's put that right. But you know what? I could get people to do things that maybe others couldn't, and that's what I think Harry saw in me, and he thought Grant's very streetwise. He's got a bit of a corporate background, where Graham would be definitely the engineer compared to me. Let's not even go there, because there's no comparison. I think he thought that I would be the driver in the business. It would be the guy that could fuse the shop floor and the commercial, so operation and commercial, and I could do that for him, where Graham would be very visionary. So where you're sitting today at Wincaster House, Graham had the vision to move to Wincaster House. He had the vision to move to Coleshill when we come out of Aston. Had the vision, but needed somebody to
make it happen.
Make it happen, yeah. That's the wording. And I'm not being disrespectful to Graham, because he'll tell you that. And we were a good team. And this was part of what Graham was doing. Graham became, I would say, the chairman role. I became Group MD in 1995. So not long after I'd been commercial director. I'd done the commercial director bit. I did the operations director. There wasn't a role that I haven't done in Sertec up until, which we'll talk about probably later, the dark days, when I started to get involved in finance. So I was dragged into the finance almost because of the issues that we got. But I've done all the roles, so it would have seemed to Harry and Graham the natural progression for me to run the business, because I'd done every other job.
Do you suffer from any of these problems? Are you asking around your office trying to find a new supplier or source materials? Have you got aged or high-priced stock that you'd like to liquidate anonymously? Or would you like new business from customers that are guaranteed to pay you for your materials? If the answer to any of the above is yes, then you'll be pleased to know that the Metal Guys Talk Business podcast is sponsored by SteelBuy. SteelBuy are a digital platform revolutionising the way businesses trade metal products online. SteelBuy offers risk-free trading where sellers are guaranteed to be paid, and automated processing including certification, logistics and invoicing. The network of vetted buyers and sellers is continually growing, and it's all housed in an easy-to-use trading platform accessible on any device. The online business-to-business marketplace for products is rapidly gathering pace, and SteelBuy are ideally positioned to capture the changing demands of steel buyers. So check out SteelBuy today and be part of the future of metal trading. Now let's jump back into the podcast.
What was your background then, Grant? Obviously, like, of what, when you was a child, obviously, and things like that, have you, like, obviously, when you're looking at people like Harry, where he was inspired and so on, I presume you've gone...
So I suppose I came from Hodge Hill. So for those of you that know the Hunter's Moon, that was my playground.
Yeah.
People talk, they love to say, I'm from a council house. I wasn't from a council house. But I was surrounded by, mates who were on council houses. We lived in a reasonable road. a fantastic upbringing, very, very happy. But my dad didn't have a great job. So my dad and my mum worked. So my mum worked for BL Cars, British Leyland, all her life, and did really, really well out of it. My dad had to work, and again, not a sob story. The truth is that he worked 6 days a week because he had a crap job, blunt as that, poorly paid, but he was hard working. He never ever seen me play football. He never went to any school when I also was in the school plays, believe it or not, so I know a bit of a mixture. Never really seen me do anything because he was always at work. We weren't rich by any stretch of the imagination, but we didn't suffer either. We weren't in backstreet toilets, backhouse toilets or anything like that, where my mum and dad had come from, because they'd come from Aston. So the only way for me to earn money, and I like to earn money, is when I got myself a paper round. How can I follow my love of my life? Well, my missus ain't listening to that, he's the Villa. So how could I go and earn money to go and watch the Villa home and away as a young lad? So I did a paper round, and that was my route, I suppose, in terms of work ethic, what to do. I didn't want to do what my dad did. I didn't want to be stuck in a factory, and trust me, that's hard. That's proper hard graft. And he was doing that. He was making hinges. It was tough. But what I wanted to do, I wanted to earn money. I'm not proud about this, but I left school having failed all of my O levels. So this is a warts and all. My dad went to his grave not knowing that. He died in 1999 and thought that I was in the...
I'm not surprised, mate. You were MD at 1995.
So he saw that for me, and he was immensely proud that somebody from roots of Aston, I suppose, had made it in his mind. My best mate was Martin Hughes, who later joined Sertec as the finance director. He had a big part to play at Sertec, I have to say.
Why was Martin so important?
So Martin was on the finance side of things. So I used to say he cleaned up behind the back of me and Graham. So me and Graham we got no risk. There was no risk in our mind. We went for it. So Martin was really, really important in the business in terms of managing somehow to keep us on a solid platform.
But you're growing up with him, and yeah.
So
you knew him when he was a kid.
We were best friends. We were at school together. He actually got 6 O levels. He should have got 9, but I think me stopping him, revising by saying, "Come on, let's go and play football every night." And I was the typical guy. I was flash. I was vain. Chasing the girls and the Villa. I just don't know why I didn't do enough at school, but I had a short, sharp shock. So when I failed my exams, you would have said out of the friends that we went round with that I would have done okay because of my education, but I didn't. It was really wasted. My mum, God bless her, and I'd say to her, without her, I wouldn't be where I am today. And again, that's not a cliche. She managed to get me an apprenticeship, and I laugh about it now because she got me as an engineering apprenticeship. I was, for all those who know me or listening to this, the Joe O'Shea's, the Pete Denny's from that Rover training school, they will say Grant was the worst apprentice we ever had. But I excelled at college, so I'd started to take things seriously. I'd got a steady girlfriend, so I wanted to flash things in life. I wanted a car. You can't do it without money. I lasted 12 months, and my mom went to see, again, because she worked at Freight Rover, she went to see the head of HR, and they said he's not working out on the craft. I was useless. But the college thing got me through. So I became the first commercial apprentice ever at Freight Rover, and that's where I excelled. So my background is...
Good job you failed then, really.
It was a good job I failed, but I didn't like... I mean, I'm honest about it. I didn't like getting my hands dirty. I was wearing overalls.
Do you think it just bored you, though? Because, I mean, like, I failed all my, stuff at school. But I look at it now, especially I've got 2 little ones, and I look at my one he just gets it, and the other one, Charlie. I look at him, he just gets bored. And I was the same. It used to bore me. But if I had to learn something about metal, or like I'm doing my job now, that's got that drive what you're talking about, the Sertec drive. But I think if you're bored, it's bored.
I was bored.
You got no chance.
Our priorities are different back then. It's girls and villa. Playing football, it just wasn't. It wasn't on my priority list. But as I said, when you start to work, you realise. First, people talk about, and you talk to guys who work with me. They will say when I first picked up my wage packet, I think it was £8 or £11 or something like that. I opened the wage. Everybody else was happy, and I went, "I ain't happy with this." And they talk about that. There's a guy called Pete Denny and Joe O'Shea. I mentioned we all grew up together at this Roma training school. Remember, we're all come up from different schools and ended up there. And I was the one that moaned, and I thought, this isn't for me. I want to get a car. I want to buy clothes every week. I want to go out. I was only 16, so I wasn't a drinker. And I didn't really drink in my early years because I just couldn't afford to do everything. But that was a massive driver for me. But also, I wanted to do something that I wanted to be happy with, and I hadn't found that. And I think that's what you say about our kids. That do think a lot of people don't understand when they're that age what they want to do, and they have aspirations of whether they want to be a footballer or things that are not.
They want to be YouTubers now.
Yeah, all the influencers and all of this. I just didn't know what I wanted to do, and then when I found what I wanted to do, oh my God, the whole thing come together.
So you're pretty lucky, really, because I think that's the thing. There's loads of people that you hear, and they're in their 40s and 50s, and they still haven't found the passion. They don't know what to do. They're still half miserable because they're like, I've been doing a job for years. I get a good pension. They're almost in the trap. And they're like, my life, basically, is crap because I'm not passionate about any of the stuff I'm doing. So really, to think that you kind of dropped into it, because was it your mum that pushed you into that apprenticeship? Did you want to do it with...
That's what I would have liked to have done. What I found really interesting was dealing with people and characters. I found it quite easy in terms of I could go back to the captain thing, getting people to do things, and I found it interesting. I mean, I used to do odd things when I was first started out in procurement. Using that as an example, I used to drive round of a night when I weren't seeing the girlfriend at the time. To drive round of a night, finding where these factories were.
Sounds like your sister.
Yeah.
She can't help it, mate. Every time she says something, she has to write it down. She pops in. She's like old school, isn't she, with the way she sells? What was he like? I wanted to ask about British Leyland a little bit. Obviously, go on, just because everyone, the impression is it was just a joke. It was rubbish. But what was it actually like?
In the early years, in '77, I joined when it was the 3-day. They're on 3 days. It wasn't the
glory days then.
Yeah, but it was proper industrial action, the Red Robbo days at Longbridge. So I worked at all of those sites, predominantly at Common Lane. I met a lot of characters, people that did have an influence on me, good or bad. I worked on the track, so I was the youngest foreman apprentice on the track. Spent a lot of time on shifts, so I have a lot of admiration for our own workforce. When the people do shifts, people don't realise what that does to your body clock and what you're missing. Some people really adapt to it, but I saw it. There was an element, there was some rogues there. So there were people that were selling suits. I can remember there used to be an area in the factory that people were bringing in and they were selling suits. And I thought, I'm supposed to be working here. The amount of people that were going for tea breaks, the amount of people that were finishing, they had got to get the quota in, so call it, they got to build 500 vans a week. And if they got the 500 vans in by Wednesday, people were literally not, they were bunking off. It was really, really difficult. So when Michael Edwards came in and shook things up and people were moaning about it, and it got, it was a bankrupt business. It was state-owned, but it was bankrupt. So when I started to sell it all off and get it right, then it was the only way. I'm not saying everybody was like that, by the way, because there was probably half the workforce were, real Rover people, real British Leyland people who really cared, but there was just so much fat in the business. There was so much wrong. It wasn't like that at the suppliers. And it just wasn't, because the suppliers, the people were working, but they were working hard. They understood what a shilling meant, and the pennies mattered. It's just very, very different.
The Metal Guys Talk Business podcast is sponsored by TW Metals. TW Metals are a stockholder and distributor of nickel alloy, aluminium, titanium and stainless steel products in a range of forms, including tube, bar, pipe, extrusion, as well as sheet and plates. They have sites located in the UK, Europe, the USA and Southeast Asia, and are the largest supplier of aerospace tubes globally. With a whole host of accreditations and in-house processing capabilities, they are the first choice for OEMs, Tier 1s, fabricators and engineering companies across the world, and they're easy to deal with. I worked with them for many years, so I can recommend them. For more details, check out their website or even give them a call to chat about your requirements. Now let's get back to the pod.
What's been the biggest challenge you had to go through since 1995, then when you took over as Group MD?
The first challenge was there was challenges all the time. 2002, when LDV, Freight Rover, morphed into Leyland DAF vans and into LDV, they became our biggest customer. And they went into administration. Can remember going with Martin Hughes to see the administrators on a Friday night. Thank God we'd had a tip-off and we took some insurance out, or else Sertec may not exist today. So that was really, really difficult. And then pretty much soon after that, MG Rover, Longbridge, they went, and we rode a wave. It was a tidal wave. That was really difficult, because I was really concerned that the company would survive. But I mentioned about, since 95, about me and Graham and Martin Hughes, we were really, really going for it, and we were acquiring businesses, taking risks. Where there was a lot of people that are my age now, we were the youngest management team, so maybe you'd say, well, that's the reason why that you didn't see the risks. But that was the first hurdle that we'd come across as a team, with those two big administrations. And then further down the line, we had the collapse in 2008, the banking crisis, where everybody else was running from the fire. We were running to the fire, and we went and acquired a company called Metal Racks Automotive, who were much bigger than Sertec back in the day. We acquired them, and I think it was a clever acquisition, because if we didn't acquire them, we would have ended up having to make a lot of people redundant. And what we did a lift and shift. We still unfortunately had to make some people redundant. But acquiring that business, again with the support, in fairness to Jaguar Land Rover, we got us through. And I think our commercial terms, that again, there was another round of people that were taken out of the industry. So there's an overcapacity that went through. At that point, I was a shareholder. Graham had in 2006 did a management buyout, and myself, Martin, and I haven't mentioned Dave Steggles yet, but he had a prominent part to play. Dave was an apprentice when we made our first acquisition in 91. He's now a shareholder and a fellow director of ours, but he became a shareholder. So in 2006, we'd done that. 2008, also the banking collapse. Then in 2012, we were absolutely flying. We then bought the factory we got in Tyseley from DPE. That was our last big acquisition. But Jaguar Land Rover had got... Had really, in terms of their architecture, it was an aluminium architecture for Range Rover Sport. We annihilated the competition. We won all of the business on that, and the business grew from 40 million to 160 million almost overnight.
Because you do a load of work with the tail trims as well, didn't you, for the road?
Yeah, we did. We did, but the business at that time, you're quite right about that. We're still doing a lot of the body and structure parts. We'd evolved from a metal basher that was doing small bracketry into structural components within the vehicle. So I always say, if you open a car, you can't see our parts because they're covered by the interior trim. But the business was flying in 2012. And then Graham, I think it's true to say that Graham had a bit of a meltdown in 2008. He put a deal together, being visionary. His brother had left the business, Carl. Rachel, his sister, who also played a part, she'd come into the business, started putting some processes in on the HR, which was really strong. And he wanted to reward his dad. And he wanted to give his dad £1 million, and he managed to do that. So I said about Harry being a millionaire, not just a paper millionaire, he was a millionaire in terms of cash. So back in 2006, Graham had done everything he wanted to do, and he wanted to reward the people running the business, which was myself, Martin Hughes, and Dave Stiggles. So we became shareholders. 2 years later, the world collapsed, and he's thinking, oh, crikey, what have I done? I was leading from the front. Remember, I was Group MD, so I was making cuts to pay, cuts to workforce. And I always remember Graham coming to me and he went, Grant, if you make another cut, I won't be able to pay my mortgage. Imagine he's the owner, the main owner. It was a crazy situation. I think it frightened him. I don't think he.
What was your situation at the time, Grant? Obviously, there, 2008.
I'd moved out of Castle Bromwich. I'd moved into Sutton Comerford, so I'd got a big mortgage as well. But I knew we wouldn't go under that. I knew that we were too good. Keep the DNA, keep what we're doing. Don't give the customer an excuse to take the business. And we were too important. If Jaguar Land Rover didn't survive, we wouldn't survive, but we'd survive. But it was hard to tell that to somebody that had done, he'd taken a big risk in terms of they'd all take cash off the table. Graham hadn't. So when the business was flying in 2012, he came to see me and went, Grant, I ain't got that love that you've got, and I want to cash some chips in. We started some discussions that really disappointed with some companies. So everybody promises you the earth, and when it comes back to it, so Graham wanted to try to sell the business. We had 3 or 4 companies, got very, very close. One an American business, I always think he's strange. He had his own plane, and he wanted to do the deal to buy Sertec. It didn't happen. He actually flew out to Vegas because I was on a stag, and he met me in Vegas. Sounds really, really wow, doesn't he? Met me at the Wynn. We had a room. Couldn't close the deal. And I always said to people, with the Mosedales, shake their hands. You never have to worry about the rings or losing your watch. I think I lost my St. Christopher with him. It was seriously, it was ridiculous. But Graham had made his mind up. So what happened in 2012, we then equalled the business out. So we did another buyout so Graham could take some money off the table, in fairness, and we became equal shareholders. Myself, Dave and Martin became the majority shareholders. So it was a big change in terms of the family. So you talk about challenges after that.
Did you know that was on the card before you tried closing the deal in America?
I'd have been a very, very rich man if that had happened myself. So I was disappointed, but not as disappointed as Graham. I got unfinished business.
Yeah. I think that's the thing, isn't it? I think mentally when you check out, you're just gone, aren't you? It's like, I don't even want to come into work anymore. I think you'd probably got quite a bit more in your locker, hadn't you, really?
And the last thing that Graham did was the visionary for this place was 2014.
Yeah.
So at that point, I knew he checked out in his mind, because we had the situation where George Osborne, who was the Chancellor, came here. He opened this place.
Yeah.
We even had the Prime Minister, David Cameron, because this is a marginal seat in Coastal. So we were in the press. I was on the TV as much as anybody at the time. We have got a few people who work at Sertec got the faces for radio, so I let them do the radio. Yeah. I did the TV.
I was going to say, he was on Midlands Today more times than Shafali.
So we were in everybody's face, but Graham took a back seat, and I found it really strange for a guy that had been so important to this business that he should have had the accolade of David Cameron being here, and we had Sky, ITV, BBC. They did he did one of his election speeches from here. I thought I was going to be on the TV because I had to do the opening introduction, but no, they're only interested in Cameron. Graham came to me afterwards and he said about me. He said, Grant, I came to see you in 2012. I want out. I want to sell the business. We went through a lot of people making all the promises in the world, Tommy the promises as we called them, and they never delivered. So we ended up doing a MBO with BGF, Business Growth Finance, who are the biggest lender of money in the UK. If you look at their record, I think they've lent billions. And we did the deal in 2016. We were all able to get something out of the deal. So, I'm not going to hide the fact that it wasn't a good deal for me, for all of us. But Dave Steggles took a big risk. He didn't take anywhere near the amount of money off the table, and he became the biggest shareholder. And he's younger than me and Martin, 10 years younger, and we had a different dynamic then. So I always say about this, you can't complain. We sold our soul to the devil in one sense, bringing private investors in, or bringing an investment house in. So the dynamic was always going to change. So Graham and Rachel exited the business. I think Rachel exited probably 4 months before that, because it was no longer a Mosedale business. But I didn't want to lose the family feel. When I say sold to the devil, it is different, because it ain't just about let's feel the temperature of the people. They want to know you're hitting the numbers. I respected Dave Steggles for not taking the money off the table and wanting to grow the business. We decided to pursue the biggest acquisition in Sertec's history, which was the Wild Group.
Yeah, it's one in Redditch, wasn't it?
It's Redditch, Witten, Hungary, and Germany. Only one company out of the 4 stand today, Hungary. If I had my time again, I would say between us and BGF, so you have to hold your hands up to these issues. I don't think we did our due diligence properly. I don't think it was thorough enough. And the business grew to a £270 million turnover, doing 25 million EBITDA. Good money. Then the world collapsed, so we talk about challenges. The volume, and we followed the dream. JLR were on the trajectory of 1 million cars a year. They got plants in China. They were about to go into Nitra. It wasn't quite that then. They got a facility in Graz in Austria that was run by Magna for them, so they're putting the I-Pace in there and the E-Pace. And really, BGF didn't do their own work properly with JLR. Shook hands on what they were told by the seniors at JLR and said, believe us, believe us, believe us. And we put the capacity in for that. Very, very soon after that, we acquired a 100,000 square foot facility in Hams Hall that we were going to put a big logistics, and we did put a big logistics facility. And where the risk that we had taken, myself, Martin and Graham, back in the day, this wasn't about our risk now. This was about the investor's risk. And I think we just didn't do our own work properly. So the biggest challenge came in 2018-19, where I started to get involved in the finance side of it. So I was called into a meeting with Lloyds Bank, Santander, who were our principal banks, and they hired at the time KPMG advisors. So was 18 of them in the room. There was me, my trusted lieutenant, Martin Hughes. One of the BGF guys was in there as well. And Martin's number 2, a guy called Mike Royal, who hadn't done anything wrong. We were just the downturn, got Brexit as well. And they said, their opening gambit to me, and I had to face off to it, was, you're either very inept or you're very naive.
How did you feel? Feel like a little boy?
I did, but I came out swinging, and they gave us a week to sort out some financial issues, or they were going to pull the plug on their facilities. Again, we went back to our partners, JLR. We got some commitment from them, and we got BGF on board. We managed to get out of that situation. BGF, in fairness, they put some money back into the business, so they get a bad press, but you have to be realistic about it. They followed the promises. You could argue they didn't do I am arguing they didn't do the due diligence right, but they were supportive. And we had 6 months of, I can only describe as pain.
What's the stress like, Grant? Because that's the thing. Like, looking at this, we roll back. You come in, you're working. You lose contract, you lose MG Rover. You've then got to change it. Then you've got the banking crisis. There's all these ups and downs, and anyone who runs a business of any size understands like it can be difficult from time to time. But you're running a big business here. When you're talking about 270 mil turnover, this is a bloody big business. Loads of people here, and you keep going on about family, and effectively you're responsible for these people paying their mortgage, looking after the kids, doing that. So when you're sat in that meeting, and you've got the banks basically say, "Look, you're a mug, mate. You don't know what you're doing." Like, what's the stress like when you leave that meeting? What are you feeling?
You do feel that commitment to the workforce. Look, a lot of the guys on the shop floor I've grown up with and known. I go out and have a beer with them, male and female. You know, we've got some fantastic people. I look at people who I call them Sertec legends, who've been here as long as I have and longer. In some of them, without them, there ain't no Sertec. You know, that exactly that point. I felt the pressure of the legacy. So imagine Graham Mosedale's passed the baton to me. So I've now got the Mosedale baton. And the problem I had in my mindset was I didn't want that to be the legacy that I left. So if Sertec went under, I was going to make sure whatever we could do to get us through. The person that burdened the stress most in that was Martin Hughes. He's the CFO, Chief Financial Officer. And it made him ill. And he had to leave the business by his own, you know. He
when was that? What year was that?
2009, so this was the year after.
So it was straight after this.
So we got out, so we restructured the business. We all took a hit on our shareholding. Myself and Martin Hughes, we had £500,000 each in the business. We lost. I don't care who you are. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Personal financial issue, which wasn't great, but that was nowhere near what both of us felt. The legacy of this business, of all the jobs that were at risk. And I'm not playing on that. It's insurmountable. You can't even compare the fact. All I wanted to do was get through the business. So when we did the restructuring, Martin Hughes, which was June 2018 now. So remember, this is 2 years pretty much after BGF have done the deal. When we did the restructuring, Martin stayed on and put his notice in and gave it, I don't know, it's 12 months, what it was. Martin leaving the business was massive. It's taken us, I think, 4 CFOs to get the right guy. And we now got all the right person. We've got one now in terms of Tim Danby, who's excellent. But losing Martin was massive for me. And I will always feel guilty that he had to take the strain. I hadn't up until that January the 18th meeting, by the way, which is in my mind, 2018. I hadn't been exposed to the bank. We've only ever had the banks wanting to lend us money because we were a star on TV all the time. We were doing well. We were growing. Now we got the naughty people. We're on the naughty step. We got the bankers from London. Wasn't anybody from the Midlands, by the way. You get put into special measures, and that's what happened. We were in special measures for a while, a weekly meeting with the banks and all the advisors. And that whole process cost us £2.5 million.
How important is it then that you've got someone like JLR, like trying to help you out? Because obviously they don't want you going bang, because you're so into bed with them in a way, aren't you? Because you're doing so much with them. So how important were they in that process?
Well, they were absolutely key, because despite the issues we were in, and we were in special measures, they still committed to place huge contract for us, and you've probably seen it when you've walked around, in terms of the buzz bars that we do on the EV side.
Yeah.
We haven't got to that bit yet. We're evolving from a stamper and a welded assemblies into the EV market. JLR gave us again, that's because of our reputation, our DNA, their experience with us. They gave us that business. So not almost a financial commitment, but their commitment to giving us new business and that we would survive. And they did stand behind it. But it wasn't just JLR, it was the suppliers, it was the workforce. It was difficult standing up in front of doing, and I did it. You got to stand up at the front and speak to people, and they're all worried about the jobs, and are we going to get through this? We got through it. But I do think Martin Hughes took a lot of the stress. I didn't realise the effect it had on me till later. You got to be at the front, and I can't show weakness to my team, and I can't show weakness to the workforce. We will get through this, and we did. But then, pandemic hits, and then that's another another challenge, and the banks are not sympathetic to the situation. So you come out of special measures, you've turned it around, the business is making a profit. We had support from other customers, by the way, not just Jaguar Land Rover. Then the pandemic hits. And what people probably don't realise about the pandemic is the aftershock. It's almost like having an earthquake, and then you get the tremors further down the line. And the semiconductor issue was huge in the pandemic. So for the semiconductors, there's a lot of, again, for people if they don't understand it, is the semiconductors can be in a phone, can be in an iPad, can be in a computer, could be in a washing machine.
They're in cars.
Yeah, they're in cars, and there's hundreds of them. And what happened in the pandemic was, and there's always winners and losers, is that people were staying at home all the time. So they were buying gaming machines, and all of the commitment that people had, where they didn't build any cars for 3 months. Well, the chip supplies went into other industries. So guess what? When they come out and they start, the demand's building up, and we want to build cars. No chips. Why? Because the chips have gone everywhere. So that was a really difficult period, because all of the customers then were on stop-start. If they hadn't got security of supply, you could be building, whether it be Nissan, JLR, if not, they could be building 1 week and then they got no chips.
Well, Mercedes had loads of problems, didn't they? They were delivering cars that didn't quite work. You know, the infotainment systems just wouldn't work. It was like, well, you can still have your car.
And you can only have 1 key because we can't give you 2 keys. So
mad.
all of that was going on. So we were stop-starting with production. And so trying to explain to the workforce, we'll only offer a week.
Yeah.
It was horrendous. And then we were laying people off. People took wage cuts. Again, led from the front. It's like going back to 2008. People were on furlough. It was not just for us, it was a really difficult time. And the automotive people didn't understand the supply chain. I was at a conference yesterday at the SMMT, and they were talking about supply risk. It's only now or in the last 2 years that they've really got to grips with securing contracts on semiconductors. It was a bit like a schedule. So a schedule lasts for 13 weeks. That's no good in that situation you're in. All of the capacity's been diverted elsewhere. So we had that, which was, I'd say, the pandemic and the fallout from the pandemic and the debt that everybody's building up. There's a lot of debt in businesses. Has got us then to the next stage where we had a situation where the investors don't want to invest anymore and they want to come out of the automotive. So we ended up having to, again, go through another restructure and another support mechanism. And again, without the commitment from the customers, we wouldn't have got through it. So actually where we are today, we're probably in a lot stronger position than we have been since 2018.
I mean, you're painting a wonderful picture of running a business. It sounds great.
Yeah, but look, we're not different to what a lot of businesses are going through. And there's the fallout from the pandemic is huge, and people have got such a lot of cost that's built up. My next worry is there's an overcapacity in the marketplace. So if you look at what's going on in Germany and you look in Europe and the pressures that they've got, you know, the trade war that's going on with China at the moment because of EV vehicles, whilst we've got this great opportunity in terms of technical revolution, as an industrial revolution that's going on with EV, and despite all of the bad news that's going on, the infrastructure that people keep talking about, you'd be surprised. They're nearly at 1 million charging points in the UK now. The communication's not around it. Again, it was at this seminar yesterday. It's really interesting. At the rate, they're actually exceeding what they need at the moment. But that's not publicised anywhere because it's on the bad news. So whilst there's a fantastic opportunity for us and we're winning a lot of business and repositioning the business in terms of EV.
Yeah, do you not think it's sustainable, like, longer term?
No, I still think they'll always need combustion engine. Where everybody says there's going to be some form of that. It's certainly not going to fit in terms of some of the long-haul vehicles. I don't think there's going to be the demand for vehicles, period. So if you look at in the UK at the moment, you've got Nissan and you've got JLR. There's a debate about Toyota, what's going to happen about the Burniston factory. You've got Stellantis, I know, but just look at the UK, there's not the demand. And then you've got very competitive pricing coming in from China, where I mentioned Hungary, that BYD is setting up in Hungary. So what's that going to do in terms of competition? There's an overcapacity now. So unfortunately, there's going to be some people that are not going to be around in our game. And we've got to make sure that we still are.
The Metal Guys Talk Business podcast is brought to you by Compton Group, a recruitment agency operating in the metal, manufacturing and engineering sectors. With a large, engaged network of candidates and clients, we help businesses make great hires in sales, operational, technical, quality and managerial roles, as well as assisting people in their careers by matching their unique skills and aspirations to businesses that are hiring. Having worked with more than 200 niche businesses since 2019, Compton Group have become the go-to recruitment partner for many of our industry's leading names. So talk to us about your next career move or let us work with you on your business's next hire. Compton Group, powering employment in the metal, manufacturing and engineering sectors.
One of the things Mike and I talk a lot about when we're chatting with business owners is we talk about these opportunities for MBOs. We're seeing a lot more of it now where second gen, sons, as you mentioned, like Graham, obviously Harry's son, came in and he got his shares early doors. You came in as a kind of almost like a son, I guess, in a way. So you were almost like a second generation for that family yourself.
And that's how I felt, by the way.
Yeah, well, you can tell the way you talk. You're so passionate about the family. Like I say, it's almost like it's a second father for you, really. So people will have opportunities in businesses now where they won't realise that an MBO is an option. Companies will look to sell. Like Graham was looking to sell a business. It's like, look, I want to sell. And they don't always look internal at who's within the business. They just go, well, I'll just sell external, sell to someone who's got cash done. What would you advise? Because you were in a business and you got that opportunity to acquire a business. And obviously we've really been drilling into all the bad stuff so far. But what was it like having an opportunity to do it? And why do you go for it?
I look at the opportunity that I was given. And I'm forever going to be grateful to the Mosedales. Harry, I speak a lot about Harry, but you can't underestimate Graham. Graham gave me that opportunity, hopefully repaid his faith in me, made him a lot of money, so he totally deserved it, so did the whole family. But they gave us the opportunity, and you've seen the advert where he says, I like the company that much, I bought it. Well, I like the company that much, I work for. I never want to leave. I'm 63. Now, I know with good lighting, that's hard to believe, I get. But I'm 63 and I never have had a day, despite all the bad times, that I've ever woke up and said, I'm going into work. I love this place. I love coming to work. I love working with the people around that I work with. And I feel very, very fortunate to do that. And I have got a good lifestyle. And I said to you before we come on air, you mentioned about if any of my children, I've got a daughter, if she was interested in coming in. She wasn't. She recognises, as does all of the family, that without Sertec, our world don't exist as it. So we're very fortunate that Sertec has given us the opportunity to do what we want to do. There is risk that comes with an MBO, because Graham did an MBO in 2006. And of course, he wanted to have that goal of owning the business. But within 2 years, it went the other way.
Yeah, it went south quick.
There is a risk to it. But what I am doing, I'm copying what Harry did. So Harry put a team together to do an MBO to take himself out and also make sure that the family was in a good position. I think that I've got a team that can do an MBO. So I've mentioned Ben Higgins, Richard Sadler, Dave Steggles and Tim Danby. 3 of those 4 have come through the ranks where they started their careers at Sertec as apprentices. And Richard left for a while, went to work for Industry Forum, where I'm really, really proud of him. He became Group MD for 3, and then he came back. We've got a team there that are definitely capable of doing an MBO. They've been through all the bad times. They were shoulder to shoulder with me in the trenches, if you like, when we went through some of our most difficult periods. And there's nothing as difficult, by the way, as 2018. I can talk about 2008 and before. I felt it was in my control. 2018 wasn't in my control. It was the banks. It was really, really difficult. But they were there, they saw it, and if we were able to do it, I want to give them the opportunity that I had. They've got a passion like I have for the business. I think the business is ready in the next 2 years, easily, to be able to do that again. However, it's whether there is the appetite from investors, from banks, to be able to support a company that's, we're a £200 million business and growing, whether we'll be able to do that. I went to Japan in the last few weeks, going over there, seeing what they do, and I'm using that as an example. But also I went to see a company that would be interested in, I said there'd be no warts and all in this, being interested in acquiring Sertec. Now, that's for a future date. I'm not saying that's going to happen tomorrow, but I've got to look at all options. But without that team in place, Sertec's not going to be the same. Some of the guys are 20 years younger than me, and more than that. They're where I was. Certainly got the credentials to do it, and I think they want to do it. But you got to make sure you can find the right financial backing. So I definitely think it's an option for us, but it's not the only option. We got to make sure that as we pass the baton on, as I call it, from me to them, and that the whole thing is making sure that Sertec is not just about that team. It's about that, the 1,500 people that we've got work for us.
Earlier on, you mentioned about the stressful time where you have to be someone to your team, someone to like your management team. Who's the person you kind of, when you're having that day, you're like, gee, I'm that stressed. Who's the person you kind of just talk openly what's going on in your head without feeling like they're seeing weakness? Or
I mentioned Marty Hughes. He was a rock to me, and I really, really missed him. Probably more, I said to the people at Sertec, when Martin left, you wouldn't realise what you'd lost until he'd gone. He was a good listener, and you need good listeners. So people that I would say are all of the board are great listeners. Dave Stiggles, because he's been on the journey with me the longest, he's the main shareholder alongside myself. So I suppose we got more to lose. He kept a very level head, Dave, throughout. And then past that, believe it or not, one of my closest mates, one of my best mates, is Martin Inkley, who runs the Tysley plant. And why do I talk to Martin? Martin had his own business, and unfortunately he went into administration. And I remember the stress that he was under. It was making him ill. So he, again, was a good sounding board for me. Very, very passionate about Sertec. Again, he's what I class as a Sertec legend. He was somebody that has been really good for me, certainly in the last 2 years.
Obviously, you've seen this with the Red Robbo days and stuff. What's the crack with Sertec? Because have you brought unions in yourself?
No, the unions have come in. So we've got Unite Union. They came in the late 90s. I'll be honest, Harry Mosedale would have been horrified, because he always said, because he'd seen what had happened with the Red Robbo days, he said, if we ever bring unions in, I'll shut the place. We didn't do that. We embraced it. So there was an issue with a guy back at British Leyland. He thought he'd been unfairly dismissed. He brought some union representation, and I not because the unions have put pressure on me, because when I looked into it at the time, the decision wasn't right from our side, so we reversed the decision. There was a guy there from Unite called Mickey Tuff, since retired, really level-headed and reasonable. I've never ever had an issue with it, if you're fair. What happens at the moment, I don't know. I definitely feel that there is a change in the strategy of the unions at the moment. I've seen a lot that's going on, whether that'll change with a change of government as well. We've got to work together. People should be rewarded for a fair day's pay. They've got to be fair. But also, if you're asking for things that are going to make the company uncompetitive, in the longer term is going to affect all of us, then that's not right. We've got to work together. I'm not trying to give a political answer to that. I'm just being honest about it. If it becomes a problem for competitiveness for Sertec, then we'll all be affected. And I don't want to do that because I've got an obligation to the 1,500 people. That's as simple as that.
So we haven't spoken that much about manufacturing in the pod so far. You used the term metal bashers and you almost were like picking yourself up on it early. It's a term me and Mike use as well. People still use it in the industry. But how's it been changing? You know, what have the changes been like? And if we really look at what's going on in the last couple of years, how different is it now from the business that you originally got involved with?
When I first started at Sertec, it was very much small to medium-sized presses, single action. So call it manual presses if you like. And manual welding, so a guy in a booth welding away, or a spot welder. We started to get a little bit more in terms of volume. It needed to become more automated, so presses became automated. You'll hear the term progression and transfer presses. So basically, where you maybe have a number of presses doing different operations, for want of a better description, a lot of the operations would be done in one press. A lot of repeat quality and the speed there, and it taking the labour element out. Welding became more robotics. I walked around this site in Japan last week, and there was 300 robots. And by the way, before anybody compares Japan to the UK, I've been around there. Whilst there's some great things they're doing in Japan, they're not doing anything better than we are. So I just want to make that clear. And that's both an OEM. When I walk around Jaguar Land Rover's plant compared to some of the OEMs in Japan, JLR are up there. So, and it's the same with the supply base. So there's been a transition from that, from a traditional stamper metal basher into, I think, more automation. And now we touched on it earlier in terms of the industrial revolution. Where I see Sertec and where I see the industry going is, we've got to be able to supply more difficult, complex assemblies. You know, our mission is to provide sustainable engineering solutions, which sounds very buzzword, but it's basically we're going to have the more difficult components. We've been able to do that as we've gone into the EV side of it. So it's still metal, it's still pressed, it's still welded, but we've got two different metals together. There's laser. Been able to win some work for a food distribution company. I don't think they want their name to be known out there, but it was a great contract for us. And that's got not just pressed, welded. We have to put labelling on. We have to shrink wrap it. And some of the work that we're doing for AESC, which is Nissan's partner in terms of battery supply, there's far more added assembly, not just about, as I said, stampings and welding. There's other things where you're putting labels on, you're putting felt on, but in an automated way. That's where I think the industry is going to. And I think if you haven't got that, you're going to die. Yeah, I know. I've been around the last 2 months, been talking to a lot of companies. There is an overcapacity in the market. And if you've only got one thing that you can offer people, you're likely to die. So what we've done at Sertec in the last 4 years, if we've expanded that product offering so we can do more complex assemblies, more difficult parts, and more things that you wouldn't associate with a traditional stamper.
How do you think the market's going for car production in the UK?
I think it's shrinking. Where JLR were chasing volume at one point, they now got some absolute excellent vehicles, but they are a luxury brand. They're not a volume manufacturer. And I don't think that's the wrong thing for them to do. I heard yesterday, I speak to somebody who's actually saw the mock-up versions of the new Jaguar electric vehicles, and he said, Grant, you are going to be blown away with what they're producing. Fortunately, we've got some new business on that, so I'm excited to see. Not just them, I just think generally, in terms of the UK market, it's not the same. Pleasing to see BMW in terms of the electric Mini is going to be produced in Oxford, but the volume's not going to be there. Look at what's going on in Germany with the Fords and the Audis. Volume is reducing. I think it's generally there. So what that's going to do, there's going to be an overcapacity in the market. Keep repeating myself, but it is.
Looking next week, there'll probably be a change in government. Do you think it'll have any effect on British manufacturing at all, or any positives of that? Or
I'm hoping that look, in the background, the civil servants, the policy makers, they are speaking. So if it's a Labour government or a Conservative government continues, or we get a surprise and there's somebody else coming in, they are speaking to people. They fully understand there's got to be some incentives put in terms of the EV side of things. I think biggest thing I learned from yesterday was the communication's not strong. I wasn't aware how many charging point infrastructure that's there. They're up to 860,000. So they're getting towards this million mark, but it's not publicised. You drive down a motorway, does it say this is the nearest charging point?
No, nothing.
It's quite awkward as well, isn't it? Like
Yeah,
if you're not driving a Tesla where it just tells you where to go here, go there. I think the rest of it is pretty crap, isn't it? You've got that many apps for it and cards and whatnot.
And then the charging points, is it a rapid charger? Is it this?
Yeah, I know.
And look, I've got a charging point at home that I use. I use it I've got a hybrid Range Rover that's fantastic. Unless you're doing a journey outside of work, I'm just charging it at home every day.
That's what you really have to rely on, having it at home and one at work. As soon as you kind of go out of that, because it's even like you're mentioning Tesla are great if you're on a motorway, but they're not great if you're driving around Sutton. The nearest Tesla charger is Small Leaf, and he wants to be around by the Blues ground.
Correct.
No one.
Yeah. So, how long you got left? And what are you going to do?
I don't play golf.
Good.
Don't blame you.
Good, yeah.
I do enjoy watching the Villa in Europe.
Really? You mentioned it?
Let's hope that continues because they're putting the infrastructure in there, providing they don't price me out of it.
I reckon you'll be all right.
I think you'll be all right,
I think
yeah.
you'll be okay, yeah.
I actually...
We'll stick you in the lower north.
Yeah, I'll
and also, because of your age, you'll be able to get the cheap seats soon.
Oh, no. Don't. That's the worry. I don't think I'm finished yet, but the reality is that I'm nearer to the finishing line than I am at the starting line. I mean, that's obvious, isn't it? I'd like to see the company through, certainly for the next 2 years. We've got some stability in the business, which is fantastic. I believe that we've got a team to replace me, so there's the succession plan is there, and I just think it's probably the next 2 years is key. I don't really want to put a date on it because you end up sounding like Alex Ferguson. If everybody knows that I'm going, then maybe you'd set your foot off the gas. I love work. I love Sertec. I haven't found something that's going to replace that buzz. As much as I love the Villa, they don't play every day. I envy the people who found it, like the Graham Mosedales, the Marty Hugheses, Rachel Jessups, Carl Mosedales, all these people that played their part at Sertec and have moved on. They found something. I ain't found it yet.
Well, thanks for sharing your story.
Yeah,
and
phenomenal.
Letting us, dig into it. That was easy. That was a really easy part. We barely asked any questions, did we?
I know I can talk. Look, I can talk about Sertec all day long because I don't have to be on camera about it. It is my passion. I love it. I love the people here.
Oh, where you go? We used to ask this, didn't we?
Oh, yeah. Go on.
Yeah.
What's your biggest up, Grant?
Yeah. What have you ballsed up where, afterwards you've thought, I cannot believe that someone who's as streetwise and shrewd as me has made such a huge faux pas?
I've made a number of appointments. They weren't what they said they were, and they really, really affected the business. I will never, ever probably get over. The biggest regret I got is making a guy redundant called Ken Grogan, who was one of the Sertec legends. I was too impetuous, and unfortunately he passed away after that. I went to his funeral, and his family shunned me. That'll live with me forever, and I regret it. Look, I made some tough decisions I ain't worried about, but that wasn't the right decision, and I was too impetuous, and it was not the right thing to have done, and his family will never forgive me. What I would say is, me and Harry Mosedale, again, we were in the trenches, me and Martin Hughes, went to that funeral where others who were part of the decision didn't go. So even though I got shunned, at least I felt in my mind that I didn't shy away from it. But that'll live with me forever because it was the wrong thing to have done.
Done.
Done, yeah. 5 years it's taken to speak to Grant Adams.
Were you used to supply them?
I did. Still couldn't speak to Grant Adams.
Never met him?
I had to do with Bryn Streggles. He was a very good purchasing manager now.
Clearly.
Yeah.
That's what I was dealing with you, Mike.
I think obviously we've started dealing with Sertec over the last couple of years. We always wanted to kind of do a podcast with Grant before we even dealt with them, didn't we? Because we looked at like manufacturing, someone in the automotive industry sector.
I think because he's known in Birmingham, I think people in the West Midlands area, Sertec as a business are really well known in the West Midlands. They've grown, really big tier one subcontractor to JLR. So lots of people will know them or have worked with them or know people that have worked with them. So I think for us, they were a business that we wanted to, go and find a little bit more about. So
it was refreshing how Grant spoke, wasn't it?
It was just so honest.
Yeah.
I mean, we said beforehand, like when we do these podcasts, we'll always say to people, look, if there's anything we record that you don't like and we can edit it and we cut it. And he was pretty much like, I'm just going to say it as it is. Yeah. That stood me in good stead for my whole career. So yeah, that's what I'm going to do.
It's quite nice how he shared his kind of upbringing, his early career. I mean, it was faultless, really. And I think it was really interesting to talk about, investment, management buyouts, times where they've had to sell to, they've sold to...
private equity and people like that. There's a lot in it.
And, losing personal money as well, when he talks about losing $500,000. I mean, it was so open. I think sometimes when people do podcasts, they use it as a sales tool. And I feel with this one, it was such an honest approach. And I think anyone who's kind of going through management buyouts, people who look at people who own businesses and just be like, God, they're rich, they're all okay. There's a lot going on that I think even people who work in Sertec will learn about Grant also.
If we look at when we started this podcast originally, like we had a few ideas and a few plans of things that we wanted to do with it. And I think this particular podcast, we've kind of gone to town on really by doing a bit more with the video content. We'd obviously got content from Sertec as well, which will have been cut up through the kind of video version of this podcast. It's something we want to push going forward. So, for people that might have tuned into this one that haven't listened to some of our previous pods, we've recorded maybe another 30 plus podcasts that you can take a listen to. But I think going forward into next year, again, we've got some target people that we want to be talking to. But if you're a listener and you know someone who's got a really interesting story in the metals manufacturing or engineering sector, let us know, because I think this is a really good vehicle for getting not just the stories these people have, but also learning about how they've done the things that they've done and how those businesses have been, some of the successes that maybe those businesses have had as well. And I think that's what I'd like to try and replicate off the back of this one going forward.
I like the way you use vehicle with an automotive podcast.
Yeah, it's a pun, mate.
Oh,
I wondered where you were going when you started.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah. I didn't even notice.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you to our sponsors, TW Metals.
Yeah, Steel by
Compton Group.
And we'll be back next week. Next week's podcast is a shorter podcast. It's a bonus pod that Mike and I are doing. It's going to be taken from one of the presentations that we've done, which is about hiring. So for the first time this season, we're actually going to talk specifically about hiring. So tune in next Tuesday for that one. And we look forward to speaking to you or seeing you then.
Yeah, hopefully we can help you drive your recruitment.
In metal, manufacturing and the engineering sector.
I have to get driving if you've got a vehicle.
Well done, mate. I missed that as well.
Oh, we've exhausted them all now.